Welcome to Your Cyber Path, the podcast that helps you get your dream cybersecurity job by sharing the secrets of experienced hiring managers and top cybersecurity professionals with you. Now, on to the show.
Now, the next clip we're going to talk about money, which is everyone's favorite subject, right? And more specifically, negotiations. Now, this comes from an episode 74, so yourcyberpath.com/74, and the episode is called The Top 5 Mistakes People Make When Negotiating. And in this episode, we didn't have any guests. It was just me and Kip talking about our top 5 things that we see people do that cost them money. And the really bad thing about negotiations is when you screw this up and you get yourself $10,000 a year less, it's not just a one-time hit, but it's every year for the rest of the time you're at that company, because most of the time your raises are going to be based off your base salary plus 3%, plus 5%, whatever. And so if I'm paying you $100,000 plus 5% for raise, you're now making $105,000. But if I was only paying you $90 and I gave you a 5% raise, you're now only getting $4,500 extra instead of $5,000. It just cost you an extra $500 per year when you got that raise next year. So that's why negotiations become so critically important. And so in this episode, Kip and I were covering the top 5 mistakes that we see people make all the time. And so if you're getting ready to negotiate, definitely go back and listen to this episode. But for this clip, we're really going to talk about the fact of how negotiating for a job can be really challenging. And we really try to bring up ways to help you earn more over time by coming up with the right compensation package. So let's listen to some advice that I actually gave in this episode, and then we'll come back and hear what Kip thinks about what I said. I always like to think about when it comes to negotiation, whether you're negotiating a salary or you're trying to buy a car or a house or something like that, the person who has the most information wins. That's what it is. It really comes down to that. So as we said, number one, the employer already knows what their pay band is. They already know what they want to pay. They already know what other people in your industry are paying. And now it becomes a matter of figuring out what are you willing to accept to do that job if they like you. And usually, we talk about this in our course as well, when you get to the negotiation phase, generally the job is yours unless you are just so unreasonable in your negotiations and you guys just can't find common ground, right? If they come in and say, I'm going to pay you $20,000 a year to be a cybersecurity analyst, you're going to say, nah, thanks, I'm going to go elsewhere, right? Because if they're saying 20 and you're saying 100, there's no way you guys are going to meet in the middle. You're just too far off. But if you said, 100, or they said 100, you said 120, you guys can probably find some middle ground and make it work. And if not, you'll go find another job somewhere else. But generally, that's what you see. So when it comes to putting out a number, you don't want to be the first one to speak. I've had a lot of people, I've been talking the last couple of podcasts. We just hired a bunch of people in our company. We're up to 19 people. And most of the people that we've interviewed with have done a really good job of, when I say, what do you think, what would you like to do for, what would you like to make for this position, of not throwing out a number first. As an employer, I hate that because it makes my job harder. But for them, it's great because, if they throw out a number, it could be significantly lower than what I'm thinking, right? And so you just never know what their number is. I always like to go in with, let them give you the number first. It'd be great if the job position actually set a salary range, but that is very rare and very uncommon. I am seeing a big movement in the HR community and from the employees community pushing on HR to say, look, if you're going to post a job out there, you really should give us a pay band, right? I should know when I'm going to apply for this job if this is a $100,000 to $150,000 job or a $25,000 to $50,000 job. Because if it's 25 to 50, you're wasting my time and your time having me apply for it because I'm not going to take that job.
Right.
If it's 100 to 150, then that's in the range that I'm willing to accept and I'll take that job. And so, as we make this change in HR, I think it's slowly happening, but still today, if you go on LinkedIn, most jobs are not going to tell you what the pay range is. All right, Kip. So what stood out to you in that clip with my little diatribe?
It was a great diatribe. I really like the things that you emphasized. Information, right? That there can be, unequal information in the parties that are in this negotiation, and the one with the more information is going to win. And so guess what? Employers almost always are winning at who has more information, who has better information. Because as a candidate, you can go out to Glassdoor, you can go to all these places and try to do, gather some salary information. It's rubbish compared to what employers have. Employers have very high quality salary information because they actually, most of them buy a subscription. These are the bigger employers now, but they subscribe to salary surveys. And the reason why they're accurate is because if you buy a subscription, you're obligated to upload to the salary survey company all the money that you're paying to your workforce. And it's got to be sliced and diced in a way that they could add it to their massive database. And then you'll get a report back that shows averages and regionality and all that stuff. So employers are killing it when it comes to information asymmetry is kind of what we call it. They're always going to have more information. So what you have to do, what we tell people is, don't say the number first, get them to say the number. And the way that I tell people to do that, we've said this before, is you need to ask the employer, what is the market rate for this position? What is the range that you've established for this job? And they know that because, again, they're subscribed to this pay information and it lets them have that advantage. So you just need to ask them for that. Now, a lot of times they will say, hey, what did you make at your last job? As a way of anchoring the conversation about, what they're going to offer you for the job that you're interviewing for. And as an applicant, never fall into that trap. In fact, that is such an unequal situation that in many cities, counties, states in the United States, it's illegal for an employer to ask you about your pay history, including your current pay. So never go there. Even if it's not illegal where you live, don't ever tell an employer what your current salary is or your history. Just focus on the market rate, and that is going to help you deal with this information asymmetry. That's what really stuck out to me, Jason. Now that you've listened to yourself again, anything new?
I was just gonna say, based on what you just said, one of the things I wanted to bring up was the fact of when we talk about this pay range, right? And the fact that sometimes they'll try to get you to say what your current salary is. Here's why you really don't want to do that, right? Again, I'm coming from the government contract world, but a lot of times we have the same contractors fighting over the exact same employees. And so there is 5 different contract companies out there, and they all want you if you already have your clearance and your experience and all that kind of stuff, right? And so if I said, oh, Kip, I want to hire you. What are you making now? And you're like, oh, I'm making 100,000. I'll go, okay, well, I'll pay you 105. I'll give you a 5% bump if you come to me. And you're like, oh, that sounds great. And you come over to my company. Now you're at Dion Consulting, right? And then, somebody else comes over and says, oh, would you come work at Boyle Consulting? What are you making now? I'm making 105. Okay, well, I'll give you a 5% raise and you can come over here and you'll make 111,000, right? And you may have been with me for a year. Now you went back over there. And so you've been making these 5% bumps, which sounds great. And generally what I see is if people stay with the same company, they're going to get about 3 to 5% per year. But I will tell you, in the DoD contracting world, I've seen some people that jump jobs and they will go up 20% or 30% or even 40% in pay because they're using the techniques you just mentioned, which is don't tell them what your salary is, because it doesn't matter if you're making 100 right now, if the position they're hiring for is going to hire at 140, because you may have been in the same company for the last 3 years and you've only been getting 3% pay raises. But I could tell you the last 3 years, inflation's been higher than 3%. And I know at my company, we gave everybody a 10% raise the last year because of inflation was being so high. And so, if you only got 3% per year, which is what most employers were doing, you've actually fallen behind over the last 3 years significantly versus what market rates are for new employees. And so by throwing out that number first, you're going to end up shooting yourself in the foot. So don't do that. Second thing is when they talk about ranges, right? Ranges are a dangerous thing. People love to throw out ranges. But when people throw out ranges, they throw them out differently. Okay. Let me make an example of this. Kip is the hiring manager. He tells me the range for his position that he's budgeted is 120 to 150. I'm the applicant. What did I just hear? I just heard that this company is willing to pay 150. What did Kip hear? He said, I'm willing to pay 120, right? Because we have a different thing. I'm hearing the highest number that I'm going to get. He's hearing the lowest number he just offered. If I went into, Costco to go buy a jug of milk and they go, well, this jug of milk is anywhere from $5 to $7. I go, well, which is it? And they go, well, we want $7. I said, well, I only want to pay $5, right? And I want it the lowest. They want the highest. And so we then have to negotiate and get into the middle. And that's what happens with the pay range. If they tell you 120 to 150, you'll probably end up somewhere around 130 to 140, right? It's gonna be really hard if they tell you 120 to 150 that they'll actually pay you 150, right? At least that's been my experience.
And it's unreasonable. And it's unreasonable for you to expect that for a bunch of different reasons we don't have time to unpack right now. But I'll just say the shortcut is you want to aim for the 50 to 70 percentile of that range, right? So whatever they tell you to calculate what's 50%, what's 70%, that's your goal. And we can unpack why later on. Trust me, there's great reasons for that. You probably don't even know, but there you go.
So like we just said, that range, if you know the range is 120 to 150, then you should be expecting somewhere between 130 to 140. That's probably realistic. You shouldn't be at the bottom of the range. You shouldn't be at the top of the range, but you'll be somewhere in the middle, right? And
Yep.
some of that doesn't apply if you start going into government positions because they have a whole pay scale and contracts and all that stuff that tells you what rate you are and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
But that's another story for another day.